closed yet.
We call the work session of the City Council of the City of Portsmouth to order. That's scheduled for today, Tuesday, the 8th of May. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mrs. Lucasberg. Here. Mr. Moody.
Here.
Ms. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Smith. Dr. Whitaker.
Present.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And Dr. Pettit.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. For the past 6 months, City staff during the public work session have presented all of the key components that comprises the FY 2019 proposed operating budget and capital improvement program. We began the budget process on January the 22nd with the presentation of the FY 2019 budget strategic initiatives with an overarching theme of economic development. The 4 initiatives are education, workforce development, internal and external focus, continuity of investment, and unique financing opportunities. We adhered to our budget mantra of review, reflect, refocus, and restore. Tonight, I will briefly review the key components of the FY 2019 proposed operating budget and capital improvement fund. In the FY 2019 budget overview, the general fund budget is $241.7 million, an increase of $2.7 million, or 1% increase over the FY 2018 budget. The total proposed budget is $720.1 million, with no new taxes or fees. As you are aware, in our budget preparation, we must be mindful of the impact of our budgeting on our agency ratings. In this budget, we have a use of general fund balance of $5.7 million. We're funding the annual OPEB obligation of $1 million. The fund balance is maintained at 15% above the general fund revenues, and we are maintaining our AA bond rating credit. In the FY19 budget, under educational highlights, we are proposing a local share for Portsmouth Public Schools of $52.8 million, which includes 9 security resource officers, school security officers at $396,000. In our capital improvement program, we're proposing $7.8 million toward education, with the building of a new middle school, design and engineering of $3 million, the school HVAC replacement, Churchland High School, $2.2 million, the Mount Herman bus loop at $350,000, Churchland Academy parking lot, $450,000, and the school bus fleet replacement, $1 million. In the overall capital program, we're proposing improvements to the Churchland Bridge replacement, the Seawall replacement, which we're working on, the sanitary sewer overflow, low-pressure transmission mains, stormwater drainage facilities repair, and the lake management program. We're also moving forward with our city fiber network. Last night, we had a presentation on our fire and rescue location study, which we will be coming back to you. But as we shared with you last night, in this budget are the proposed funding for a new fire station, and Truxton is what is listed. But we will be coming back to you in a couple of weeks with the information which you requested. In here are the Effingham Street improvements at the Naval Medical Center, which all of this information and maps have been provided to to you, addressing the social service building HVAC and roof replacement, and the fuel reconstruction sites at both Churchland and the Operations Center. Members of City Council, that is a overall summary of the budget, of which each of the meetings that we have had over the past 6 months, each of the components have been presented by key staff with opportunities for questions and engagements. And so tonight, I will go through those city manager report items that comprise the key ordinances that will be before you tonight.
All right. Any questions? Yes, sir. Put your hand up first.
Yeah, Dr. Patton, I have a question pertaining to the fund balance issue that we discussed last meeting, and it's in reference to last April, just before our budget vote. There was a $2.1 million transfer from the general fund to cover the police body cameras. And in that transfer, it did not indicate any line item that was coming from. Is that because that came out of the unassigned, at that time, general fund balance?
I can't answer that right now. We would have to pull that up and look and see exactly what you're speaking of. You said it was in...
It was the April. It was at the April meeting.
Okay.
And it's in the minutes.
All right.
So it shouldn't take long to pull it up. But when we transfer funds like that, when it's presented to council, if there's no line item that the funds are coming from, for example, there was a $400,000 transfer from salary line item to overtime pay for public safety.
Right.
It indicated that it was coming from a particular line item when it transferred to cover overtime.
Okay.
When that same type of ordinance is presented to council for a general fund request transfer and there's no line item indicated, then where are those funds coming from? I guess that's just a... yeah.
I can have Mrs. Seward to address it, Dr. Whitaker.
Okay. Let's take one thing at a time.
Oh, she's coming up now. I'm sorry.
And then Elizabeth had her hand up next.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. So there are two ways that the council can take action to put funds into play. One is a transfer, which is internal, where you take appropriations from one account and put it to another, like you talked about, moving it from salaries to an equipment. The other is a new appropriation, which is where you appropriate funds from the unappropriated fund balance or the unassigned fund balance. So there are two different ways to put monies into play. A transfer is actually moving funds that you've already appropriated. You've already put them into place. We just want to move them and transfer it from one line to another. An appropriation from the unassigned fund balance is actually a change to the budget. It actually increases the budget permissions and pulls it from that unassigned pot. So it's not an appropriation that you've already provided.
Right. So in that case, when we did the appropriation back in April of $2.1 million, and there was no line item indicated, it was just within the general fund balance that it occurred. Therefore, that came out of the unassigned fund balance.
So that sounds like what happened. I would want to research that and see specifically for that particular instance, but that sounds like what occurred, is that you all probably authorized an appropriation from the unassigned fund balance. Right.
And so our last discussion on moving funds from the unassigned fund balance, I thought that was frowned upon and something that was not supposed to be done outside of our policy of if it's a reoccurring expense, then that goes against the policy of transferring.
Yes, sir.
So in that April appropriation, we appropriated money for body cameras, and also we appropriated money for salaries. And so if we appropriated money for salaries, then that would be a reoccurring expense.
Yes, sir. I'd have to look at the nature of it, but that does, I mean, if you are appropriating for a one-time purchase, like a camera, any kind of an equipment, which you have done in your operating budget, you pulled from the unassigned fund balance for one-time purposes. If you pull it for salaries, which is reoccurring, that would not be a good use of fund balance.
Okay, so in it was the April 25th meeting, and it was item 17-186, and it said adoption of an ordinance authorizing the transfer within the fiscal year 2017 general fund balance of $2,158,000 to reallocate salary savings to cover anticipated budgetary adjustments needed in certain regular overtime and part-time salary. So
that is not an appropriation from the unassigned fund balance. What that says is it's a transfer, which means you have already appropriated dollars to one line item, and you're asking permission to move it to another purpose.
Okay.
That is appropriate. That's within your policies. That's commonly done in localities, and that's acceptable.
Right. And the question then is when in doing that and transferring it, and when it comes before council like that, what's the particular line item? Because in other requests or ordinances we have, it had a line item where it was coming from. For example, it came from salary line and went to overtime. So in this instance, why isn't that a line item?
So it sounded like what you just read was actually a transfer from a salary account to another account.
Okay.
So that's, again, acceptable because that's appropriations that you have already adopted as a council, and they're changing the purpose. So that's acceptable,
Well, here it says salary savings.
which is coming from a salary line item. So
Okay.
let's say you put $1 million in the police department overtime line item, but they only needed $800,000. Which would leave $200,000 available for them to transfer off of that overtime line item over to maybe an equipment line item to buy the body cameras or whatever you all approved.
Okay.
So again, you're just moving the purpose between expenditure accounts. You're not actually adding more permission to purchase.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking that because I'm trying to get a grasp on the this fund balance unassigned. So and from what I understood, you said last meeting that if it's in the unassigned, according to our policy, it cannot be used for reoccurring expenses. And in this case, if we were to bring in this fiscal year $10 million more in revenue, are you saying that those funds would not be able to be used for any type of salary increase?
It would need to go through your budget process, and so when you adopt a budget, you're adopting an estimate of revenue collections and an estimate of expenditures that you expect to incur, and they should balance, and they do balance. Clearly, we're not that good that we get it to the dollar. So revenues, if we do our job well, revenues should be close but always be a little bit higher than what we've actually budgeted for the coming year. And then expenditures, we should stay and only spend within the means that you all have authorized us to spend. So at the end of every fiscal year, there may be some amount that is revenues over expenditures that falls to the fund balance. But staff is not permitted to use that money without coming back to council and asking you to either appropriate it for another purpose, and that would have to come through council for your authorization.
Yeah. So right. So that's my question. So it can be appropriated for other uses,
It can.
even if it's in the unassigned.
Well, so the difference is when it comes from the fund balance, it's not been certified as a reoccurring revenue. So the only time recurring revenues are really being certified is when the city manager presents her budget to you. And she says, these are the estimated revenues that we certify are recurring and dependable for you to prepare a budget upon.
Okay. So if there are expenses that are certified by the city manager, then those expenses will not fall into what we call the unassigned fund balance.
So those expenses that you all authorize in a budget, you're authorizing expenses to be incurred from revenues that are recurring. So when you adopt a budget, part of your check and balance is to make sure that the city manager is providing to you a balanced budget to where only the recurring expenses are being pulled from recurring revenues.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm not clear on then is that based on what I'm hearing and what I heard last week, once again, if we were to receive $10 million more in revenues, are you saying that those revenues would be a part of what you're calling the general fund balance, and it would be designated still as unassigned?
Excess revenues over the planned expenditures will fall to the fund balance. And remember, revenues are not all reoccurring. Sometimes they're one-time revenues. You can get, for example, if you have an incident with emergency management, you can get a one-time reimbursement for those expenditures that will come in, and so your revenues may be higher than what you had anticipated.
Let's say these are from taxes.
Well, that's where that's where each year that certification occurs in the presentation of your operating budget. That's where the current revenues are identified and presented to you, and that's what you have before you tonight.
Yep, right. So once again, if that's $10 million and we call that reoccurring because we have collected more taxes than expected, then the city manager can make a request to council that those funds be appropriated from that general fund balance to a specific use.
So if new additional recurring revenues were to be identified, then council, we would have to come to council and say, we have identified a new source of recurring revenue for which we would like to ask you to amend the budget, and you would accept and appropriate those dollars for whatever purpose you all designated.
And as long as that doesn't take us below that 15% threshold, then as far as there being an issue with our credit rating, then we would still be in good standing.
So I want to make it clear. So there are two different kinds of amendments. One is an amendment that pulls from your unassigned fund balance, okay, and that's not a recurring revenue. And the other is, should something occur and we introduce, an increase in some tax stream, and it generates $500,000, and we've identified we can increase this tax stream at this rate and generate $500,000. That is where you could find a recurring expense that you could use those funds for. Okay, so that's the difference.
Okay.
Does that help to clarify?
My question, just for posterity purposes, because it's about the trucks and fire station.
Yes.
It's in all our budget documents, and I hate for somebody to come back in another 10 or 15 years, kind of like we were saying last night, well, that was in the budget and somehow it got pulled out. Could we not make some one-sentence amendment to the verbiage to say that is for fire station management, relocation management in that area? I just hate for the budget to say Truxton Fire Station in a capital improvement plan when we're not planning to build a Truxton Fire Station. I mean, we all know what we're going to do, but it's not what the budget document says.
In order to reflect that, it would take some time to amend the CIP budget. But if I understand you, Vice Mayor, the issue is the placeholder where we sit today. And that's still in the budget.
Right.
The determination as to how it would be applied has not been adjusted. If I understand the concern about the presentation yesterday, when talking with Dr. Patton, we presented you some discussion matters about that possible reallocation of resources.
Right.
But it has not been removed for the
But what
budget.
she's saying, in the document we have right here, it says the word Truxton Fire Station.
I'm going to vote on a document that says I plan to build a Truxton fire station. And in fact,
They may not.
I don't. For posterity purposes.
Right.
In fact, we don't. I don't mean I don't. We're gonna, we have a better plan
Put in there?
to better service that area.
At the time, you can certainly adjust that at a future
Decision.
date when that
It's the
decision is
decision.
solidified.
That's it.
You can adjust that
That's it.
aspect
And
at
we'll
a future
refer
date.
back to this,
Certainly.
this CIP budget.
Certainly.
Okay. Let's not forget that.
No, we won't.
Okay, Bill, you had your hands up.
Yeah, at the CIP budget, the Effingham piece, I want to make sure that, I suggested a few weeks ago that we needed to see if there's any money available either from DOD or Homeland Security.
Yes.
Since that improvement is going to facilitate more efficient traffic flow onto that base.
Excuse me.
I would think we should at least ask the question, let them answer it.
Yes, Mr. Moody, you had called that to our attention. And Mr. Wright, can you speak to that, please?
Before he comes up,
Okay.
I was going to bring this on
All right.
under council liaison. I serve as the city's representative to a RUMFA. That's a military alliance.
Yeah.
Got a briefing on the federal budget. Strange situation where Congress appropriated more money to DOD than that was asked for. And they do have a program for capital improvements like that. And so the message was,
Terrific.
ask.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
I had forgotten that you had brought it up.
Yes.
Good, that's
But-
good news, Mayor.
And we had
I
passed that
recommend
on.
that you get with Admiral Quigley
Okay.
and put the
Sent an
ask
email the
in.
other day. Okay.
It-
Then we
What
can
they
do
were
that.
saying was, don't be shy about it. Ask.
Admiral Quigley sends something to us almost every week, and I think you all get it also. So Mr. Wright, our engineer, who, when we received Mr. Moody's ask of what can we do to try to go a federal or whatever state to support, that has been on Mr. Wright's radar, but we'll make sure this week we'll reach out to Admiral Quigley and see what we need to do to put in that application for it.
One other thing, got a list of things for this one right now. The savings. We had a general discussion on that a few weeks ago as well, that our savings, or investment savings, I'll put it that way, which I think were 70 last year, we're projecting them to be 700,000. I think we all know that's significant, and I'm confident that our treasurer will improve upon the 70. But I think we should get at least quarterly updates on where we stand on that as we move into the new budget. That's a significant difference.
Dr. Pat, you got your
Mayor, the city treasurer had asked a week ago that after we get through the budget, he would like to be on a public work session, and we can schedule him for the upcoming 21st, if you choose, to bring council update on his process of acquiring and
And would
increasing
you
the
give me
revenue.
an alert to about Bill's concern?
Yes. And I answered,
Not concern, but statement.
Yeah.
I answered that.
Yeah, just that we need to get periodic updates
Right.
on how that interest savings is coming along.
And investments.
Did I see another hand over here?
The investment savings.
All right.
We're going to move into the
I was going to
operating.
go through these items that are before you on the city manager's report. 18-176.
You want the floor now or later?
Later.
After she finishes.
Going to go with this. you want me to proceed?
No, go ahead.
Okay. 18-176, adoption of an ordinance and resolution to appropriate the total lump sum of $720,102.69 for the operation of the city government for fiscal year 2019 for the following areas. City operating budget, $431,621,790. Capital Improvement Fund, $38,140,062. Public Utilities Capital Improvement Fund, $56,800,000. Parking Authority, $250,000. And Portsmouth Public Schools operating budget, $193,290,217. A under 18-176 is adoption of an ordinance to amend and reenact ordinance number 2017 through 25 to impose a levy taxes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019 on real estate, tangible personal property, privately owned pleasure boats, privately owned camping trailers and motorhomes, and machinery and tools within the city of Portsmouth, Virginia, for the purpose of raising revenues for the support of governmental operations and the public free schools, and to pay principal and interest on the public debt. B, adoption of an ordinance to make a technical amendment to Amendment A of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia, 2006, to reflect the execution of a contract with the City of Chesapeake in 2017 for the provision of water, and to amend Appendix A to eliminate the current charge for ambulance building -4 supplies. C, adoption of an ordinance adopting the FY 2019 classification and pay plan for employees of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia. D, adoption of a resolution approving the Community Plan and Development 2019 Annual Action Plan of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia, and authorizing the city manager to file documents required to obtain the city's community planning and development grant entitlements. E, adoption of an ordinance approving the fiscal year 2019 operating budget for the Portsmouth Public Schools in the amount of $193,290,217, and appropriating the necessary funds for classification to amend 1, the grants fund category of said budget for the entire fiscal year 2019, and 2, the remainder of the said budget for the first quarter of fiscal year 2019. F, adoption of an ordinance approving the FY 2019 through 2023 capital improvement program for appropriating $38,140,062 in the FY 2019 capital improvement fund, $56,800,000 in the FY 2019 Public Utilities Capital Improvement Fund, and $250,000 for the Parking Authority Capital Improvement Fund. G, adoption of an ordinance to appropriate $431,621,790 for the operation of the city government during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018. And then that includes all of the items that will come before you that relate to the general operating budget for FY 2019 and the capital improvement program for 2019 through 2023. Okay, then I have one more item. Okay. 18-177, adoption of an ordinance authorizing the transfer of $857,500 between classification in the overall and fourth quarter FY 2018 Portsmouth Public Schools General Fund operating budget.
Mayor, I got a few things. I'm going to start with 18-177, the request for reappropriation of the $857,500. I think it's paramount that we do something for the teachers' salary increase, and I say teachers. And I think this is a good opportunity. What I'm going to do is ask for a consensus that we recommend, and I think the key word there is recommend, because I don't know that we can do anything more than that. Recommend that money be returned to the school system with our recommendation that it be used for teacher salary increases. With that said, am I on sound legal ground, Mr. Ashby? Where do we fall legally on a recommendation versus us as a body giving teacher salary increase? Okay.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, as a city council, you establish the funding for school systems, and once you have made an appropriation, the only folks who can guarantee whether or not that results in a raise is the school system. And so that would be the school board and the superintendent. Once you make an appropriation in the allocations as you do, those decisions are the school board and the administration. You really can't earmark or guarantee that will be utilized for a raise.
But my verbiage that a recommendation, that's general enough.
Certainly, certainly the council can convey its intent in the discussion in terms of your purpose for that, but the follow through is certainly on them.
And that would be my consensus, Mayor, that at the appropriate time that I get a consensus on that.
All right. Dr. Whitaker.
Yeah, I would be against that on several grounds. Well, first of all, Councilman Moody, where you presented it, I thought I heard you say you're recommending that it be returned back to the schools to be used for salary.
Reprogrammed.
Yeah. Well, it can't be returned back to the schools because the schools already have it. We already appropriated this money to the school when we voted on the budget last year, so it's not being returned. The other issues I have with this is the memo that we received from the city manager indicating a recommendation to what Mr. Moody just suggested, that these funds be used for teacher salaries. First of all, that's problematic because that's the whole issue that has been raised about categorical funding. That I think that the council now is overreaching and micromanaging when now we're telling the school system how and where it can transfer funds when the money has already been reallocated. Secondly, the reason I went through that discussion with the CFO a few minutes ago was to illustrate that the very thing that the schools are asking for is a practice that we're already doing, and that is what the schools are requesting is that this $857,000, which they indicate in the memo, is a result, and I believe it says $782,500 of that is a result of vacancy dollars. It's the same thing that the CFO just explained to us, that a significant portion of what we reallocated to body cameras, salaries, overtime pay, it came from salary savings. It's the same thing that the school board is doing. And so how is it that now we can vote for it when the city does it, but when the school does it, it becomes an issue? To me, that seems unfair, and it's overreaching, and it goes against very practices that this city council is involved in. And so I'm totally against that. I think the citizens have set up a system here where we have a superintendent that runs our schools. It was this council, out of some actions by certain council members and administration, that now we have this categorical issue that we're dealing with. And so I'm totally against it because it flies against the very thing that this council, which our CFO just described, has been already doing. And I think it's cruel. I think it's cruel. I've already indicated that there's a spirit on this council that it is anti-education. This is moving now more into trying to be cruel. And I think that's totally goes against this whole essence of this new Portsmouth we keep talking about. This is an old concept. And so I'm totally against that.
Question, isn't this leftover money that from their budget? They want to encumber it?
This is money that is within their budget that they have come forward with, presented to the city manager. Actually, the first letter comes from the chair to the mayor. Then I get the information which says that they want to realign this money in teacher computers
For different purposes.
For different purposes.
Right. I mean, the act and the process of encumbering is normal. I mean, that's something that they've done they've always done, and I'm just thinking that that's all that is just that they have this money and now it's left over and they're giving us purposes for use. If they don't use it, then it will have to come back to us. Is that correct?
Listen, he's got the floor. Let's answer his question.
Well,
Right.
Mr. Ashby raised his hand to answer.
Mayor, Vice
I'll
Mayor,
recognize you.
members of council, to the extent that the money is in a particular category, it must remain in that category unless there's the council reappropriation into another category. That if it's not, it would carry over to the end of the year and could be put back into the system in that same category or moved into some other category. That has been the practice over the years. So it cannot be moved from one category to another without
I'll approve.
correct. And that's the system set up in accordance with the Commonwealth.
Right.
Dr. Wood.
Right. Those are two different issues. That's speaking to year-end money. This is not year-end money. The school system will make a request near the end of the year for any funds that they feel will carry over. This is a request for a transfer with their reallocation of funds within a budget that we've already approved. And so I think what I'm hearing is a year-end type of assessment, and that's not what this is. These are not year-end monies. These are monies that they're saying we want to move from one line item to another, which, as I said before, we do that all the time. We did $2 million of it last budget year.
Other questions?
So I
Lisa.
guess, yeah, so, I mean, so if it is not year-end money and if they already have it, we've already given it to them and they've already decided how they want to use it. I mean, is that a permission? So we have to grant permission for them to move this money to a new line item?
Correct.
That's correct.
And back to my point, if they don't present a purpose for using it, we are almost at the end of the year.
That's exactly right.
It's time
It is.
to make those adjustments, and that's what I see they're doing. We did it my 10 years on the school board at this time of the year.
Well, if we want to play that out, then what council could do then is when these requests come in for reallocation from the school system, if we want to cut the school system budget, we could continue to deny the request and let it play out to the end of the year and it now becomes end of the year money, and then when the request is made to reallocate it, we say no. I think that's disingenuous.
Well,
I think it's disingenuous. I know what you're saying, but I think when we allocate money to the schools, and they are using it for purposes that have been outlined, it's not for city council to manage the school system and say, no, we don't think you should be using the money to test water, to buy computers. There are 49 teacher vacancies in our school system. Part of it is because we can't pay competitive salaries. Some of it is because teachers have left during the year. Okay? And I have children in the school system who are in classes where there are not licensed teachers. Okay? And so I think that and I understand what you're saying, but I think that that's how it's being played out. I think the school has to be stewards of its funds as well as the city, but I think we're taking advantage now of the categorical funding as a means of cutting the school system budget, and that's what it does.
I have a question for Dr. Pat,
Yes,
and
sir.
a question to my colleagues. The
Okay.
first question, are they using, when they transfer it from A to operations and maintenance and technology, is this for things that they're going to consume in this fiscal year, or is it for next fiscal year? If it's for next fiscal year, then I think we have an issue. And what
I
do you
mean,
think
there are a
about-
list of things here. I'll just give you an example. Here it says $80,000 to fund the Paint and Craddock Middle School, Victory Village, Parkview Elementary, and those. In the transfer of September of 2017, we transferred almost $300,000 for the painting of schools. So, you know, we as staff look at what the requests are. Whenever a request comes from anyone, be it the schools, from a department, from anywhere, we look at what this request is before we come before council on the city manager's report before you. So, you know, we had listed 200, almost 300,000 expenditure for painting of schools. We say $221,520 for utility costs, electricity, water, natural gas, stormwater, for the remainder of the fiscal year. Well, I guess the question would be that Portsmouth Public Schools are not at the point that the lights are going to be cut off, or they don't have any money in a line item for their electricity, water, natural gas, or stormwater, because they have budgeted for the year. Everybody budgets for a year, and you know what your costs are. So with the electricity piece and electricity costs, you budget so that you can cover the year of those kinds of costs. Stormwater, you know what your stormwater costs are. The pest control, $30,000 for pest control for school buildings through the end of the year. I mean,
That should be budgeted as well.
you know what your costs are that they incur in the budget. Our public utilities director did talk with their operations, Mr. Ziegler, in regard to $23,500 for water testing at all school buildings for continued compliance of the state. We did have a citizen to call to our attention that at one of the meetings, the student representative said that there was a school or some schools where the water tasted funny. Immediately, Mrs. Tremere reached out to say this was a report from a citizen, answered the citizen back, told the citizen that she was following up, but the answer was there is nothing wrong with the water in the schools. Everything is good. But then it appears here for water testing. So the custodial supplies and needs, you would think that you have the custodial supplies. We're almost out of school. We only have, some weeks before school is out. And then $397,500 to replace high school teacher laptops. You remember last year when, and Mr. Jones has been the one, Daniel Jones has been the one that has talked about how partnering, as we did with the whiteboards, which we went a different way from the whiteboards after they had been ordered at 2.3 something million last year, that through his contacts and how he works with his procurement, can get teacher computers. Probably, they didn't say in here how many they were ordering at a reduced bulk cost.
So I think I'm hearing that you were saying that it's not clear, that it may be for supplies that are being used in the next.
Well, yeah, if you're
Yeah.
spending 40, yeah, I
That
would
was
say.
the first thing.
Okay.
I said I had two. And this is for my colleagues. Are we ready to go back to the old way that we appropriated funds to the school board, which is a lump sum, not by category? And this is to my colleagues. And that you can do that one of several ways. You can do it as a lump sum like we did, or you could do it on a periodic basis. But are we at a point where we can talk about going with a lump sum appropriation? It would make it easier, I think, for discussions about increases, because they can look at their budget and set their priorities. I think that by category kind of hamstrings them. And I think it would go a long way, too, to say, you're public officials, we trust you. And as one member of council, I'm ready to favorably consider going away from categories for the next fiscal year and going to a lump sum appropriation.
I support that because it worked. It worked for a long time, and this having to send us a letter saying we need to move it from here to here because supplies that are in this category are running low, or we found that we need something over here. I mean, it sets up almost a budget discussion every quarter. So I'm for lump sum funding.
I had my hand up before him.
No, but I said I had two things, and I introduced the first thing. I'm going with the second thing.
I was just coming in as Mr. Moody just did.
Okay.
To say that I would the school system has been asking that funds be allocated non-categorically. If that were the case, we wouldn't even be having this discussion tonight. Okay? And I think I agree with you. I'm in favor of that, and I'm glad to see you're the one that's bringing that to the table. And so I would be in total agreement with what you just said.
And then again, that's part A. Part B is that we do it one-time appropriation. We appropriate the whole thing at the beginning of the year, and not periodic.
At the fiscal year.
Pardon me?
In 2020.
For now.
No, I thought you said, okay. Oh, for
Yeah.
July
For the
1.
upcoming fiscal year.
Okay.
So that the appropriation ordinance is that council hereby appropriates the sum of X millions of dollars to the schools. And so it's non-categorical, and it's one appropriation. We don't have to come back quarterly.
And we shouldn't be micromanaging their money.
So we've heard from two members of council. You got your hand up.
I was a big proponent of going to categorical funding at the time. I would support your suggestion to go to the
Lump sum.
blanket funding. They are an elected body who needs to be held accountable for the way they divide their funds, just like we do. However, I would like to hear from the manager or the CFO if that money should be actually doled out quarterly from a cash perspective.
All the money.
Yeah.
I think the issue is non-categorical.
Well, it's two issues, really. It's non-categorical. That's issue one. And then whether you do it as a lump sum
payment.
appropriation, or do you do it periodically? And
Or monthly or quarterly or whatever they recommend.
I wouldn't be in favor for. I'm in favor of doing a lump sum appropriation, and I think that's a policy issue for council to decide. And I think we need, again, my position and I just thought of this, and so I don't want anybody to think that they're being blindsided, but I think it's really what we should do. We should go to lump sum appropriation.
Quarterly issue.
No, not quarterly.
Oh, it's going to kill us then.
So let's hear from other people.
Yeah, I agree with, taking the categorical away from them because, like you said, they are elected body and they're responsible for their funds. I guess the only question about the lump sum, between the lump sum and the quarterly, is does the city have that fund like we've heard in the past based on when our income comes in, like personal property taxes don't come till June. So is the money there to give it all to them in July or not?
No.
That's my question. So if the funds are not there to give it to them once, it's not micromanaging them, but we might not have the funds, we could give it to them quarterly or whatever, but it's still the same amount, just divided up.
Okay, let's hear from Ray.
Well, I have no problems with it, but you just jumped off the subject. Bill's question about this year, that's future. You're talking about next year, but we never really addressed his point about this encumbered money or what we feel is encumbered. So you've jumped to another whole subject.
Well, I appreciate to me, it's related because.
Well, I don't have any problems with it.
Okay.
But that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear your voice. But it sounds like we're moving towards a consensus that we go with with a non-categorical.
More discussion, though, than tonight.
Go ahead.
Well,
Lisa had some.
Yeah,
Yes,
I've been trying to get it. I guess being a new person on the council, that's how I always thought it was. When we gave them $52.4 million, even though it was categorical, I thought they always had the privilege to be able to spend it how they want. So I guess now my question is, why did it go to categorical when whoever members of the council was here? I'm in favor of them having the privilege of spending it how they want to. Now, whether we give it to them in a lump sum or biannually or whatever we come up with the council, I would be in favor of that because that's how I thought it was expended.
And let me clarify what I said. It's not literally writing a check for $192 million. It's making the appropriation just like we appropriate our funds. We don't get all of our funds on July 1 either. They come in during the course of the year. And so what this does is it cleans up, it sends a loud message to trust, about trust. We trust you.
To make the decision.
Yeah, and to set your own priorities.
Just to go back to Ray's comment, I kind of agree that's what we should do going forward, but also looking at what they're requesting tonight to transfer these funds, pretty much everything that I see in here is really going to be something that's used within the next fiscal year. So all of this stuff, it looks like to me, we're looking at 4 weeks till school's out. So I don't see where any of these funds are going to be utilized in this fiscal year. So
That was my question to the doctor.
and that's exactly, and that's, and listening to what Dr. Patton said and reading them for myself, it appears that all of these are for post-July 1.
And I appreciate what you said, Ray, but it was in the spirit of this conversation that the idea came to me that, if we're saying to the school board, we want you to set your priorities, Dr. Whitaker's right. When we get down to doing it by category, we're really kind of micromanaging. And I am perfectly comfortable going to the way we did it for years, where you do one ordinance that appropriates the funds, lump sum, as opposed to category.
We used to refer to as block funding.
Sir?
Block funding, all one time,
One time.
lump sum.
Right.
But remember why that was done. And it wasn't.
That was my
It
question.
wasn't out of the blue. It was because of what happened.
Right, and
And the
we're not
grand
trying
jury
to,
and
yeah.
all that.
But we're talking about going forward. We're talking about this council, not a previous council.
And that's why I say I don't have a problem, because the majority of those present aren't there any longer. If you know what I mean.
Yes, I do know.
It's a new board, just about.
And a new staff.
Same on this side as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, Dr. Whitaker.
Given that, then, I would hope that we would vote in support of this ordinance, that we would vote to approve it, because if that's the direction we're moving in, then we can start tonight by showing that too, by approving what has been presented. And Dr. Patton, I noticed there are two recommendations. There's a recommendation for approval, and then there was one recommended not to approve.
Well, it's the conversations that you all are having right now. So, I mean, it's council's decision, and the question was asked of me by the mayor. Did I think that these things are going to all be spent in the next 3.5 weeks? Or when school closes, we're in about 3.5, 4 weeks.
Well, I think that becomes a year-end conversation.
No.
That becomes a year-end. That's not what this is about. This is no. See, this is the issue. This is a request to transfer. Now, if the encumbered or non-encumbered issue comes up, that will come up June 30th. That's where that discussion. This is not. You were saying that the mayor jumped to another. You're jumping to end of year discussion. And the second issue is that if that's true and there's a consensus that we want to, then we need to change the ordinance that we're voting on tonight to take out the language of categorical.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
But my concern is, because whether it's cash or supplies, it's inappropriate for you
Me.
to buy 10,000 reams of paper that you don't intend to do but use this year, but you're going to use it next year. And so on the school side, they can't be stockpiling supplies for next year. That's in next year's budget.
Right.
And that's where I get a concern about this money. I just want to make sure that it's not being spent to spend it by June 30th, but in effect, you're buying things for the next fiscal year, because that's inappropriate.
Once again, that becomes an end of the year discussion. That's not what this is.
It's
We're
becomes
at
enough.
the end of the year.
Now.
Well,
This is the end of the year.
that's not what this is.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's your. That's your. Well, I mean, you've worked for organizations before. You've dealt with budgets.
Talking about the school board.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying I think that we need to handle them each case. This is a transfer request. What you're discussing is an end of the year issue.
Well,
I don't have no problem with
It's the
that.
end of the year.
It's not an end of the year. It's not an end of the year request. It's not an end of the year request, though.
Okay, let's not talk over each other.
Mr. Ashby had his hand.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, please be aware you have two things in front of you tonight, at least. You have a budget for the school system. You have an appropriation for the first quarter of next year. Historically, and I only raised this because it was issues previously raised by council members, because of the fluctuation in revenue, I think the allocations have been designated quarterly. At one point in time, council had an issue about paying monthly, and so you need to be cognizant of cash flow for
So he
the
said he's
entire.
telling us not to change that.
Okay.
We're
I know.
not changing anything.
And the only reason I say that is because I don't know, I'm trying to make sure that our ordinances as they exist reflect what you're trying to do when we have
And
operated.
What's
They-
before us
they
tonight
reflect
does
what
not.
we're doing.
Correct.
And if we have a consensus, then I would say staff get to work in the hour between now and 7 o'clock to come up with the ordinance that looks like the old ordinance that made a single bottom line appropriation effective July 1. And you got time to do that. And so what would happen on the when we get to this consideration there would be a motion to amend the ordinance so that what we consider is the amended ordinance, which would be a lump sum appropriation effective July 1. It would appropriate all the funds. And I would think that it would be pretty easy to knock out between now and 7 o'clock.
But I'm still not clear on what he's saying.
I think where the disconnect is we're all agreeing that we're going to give it to them. It's not categorically. I think what the city attorney brought up is how often do we give them payments on that? Because that's the question. We can't give it all to them July 1. That's the disconnect here.
That's a staff budget.
Yeah,
The mayor's aware of that.
The mayor said he wasn't changing that. We're giving the quarterly as we have.
We're not.
They're not coming back to deal with categorical. The money is this. You get this 44 million here. You get this 44 million here. You get this 44 million here. You get that 44 million there, which is equal to all of your money over the course of the 4 payments. That's the only way we could do it.
Right, and even with the quarterly allocation, it still is distributed monthly.
Yeah, we do. We
do it
do.
monthly.
Yeah.
So I
yeah.
don't think
We're not
that's
changing that.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I think it's 2 different issues. One is that we're going to appropriate it non-categorically. I think the school system and the city would want to work together to make sure that funds are available.
We are making this so complicated. If you just go back the way we appropriated the funds before it went to categorical and before it went to quarterly.
Right.
That's the way we did it, and that ordinance exists probably still on the computer.
Right.
And so you
still do the
find
same
that
thing.
ordinance, and you substitute the new numbers.
You got it. We're good. We're good.
Can you do it?
Yes.
Do we have consensus on this?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess I'm trying to understand, what are we talking about, that particular ordinance? Or are we
We're talking about
the budget.
the budget, the FY19 budget.
I see, Bill.
The budget. We're not talking about the 18-77, 177.
This is done too hasty, but, I'm not in the
Okay. Let me restate where I think we are. In the context of the conversation that was initiated on 1877, which
Okay.
is transferring, it's a budget transfer between categories. I asked 2 questions. One of Dr. Patton, whether or not the money that's being transferred were for things that would be consumed by June 30th.
No.
Okay, got that answer. Then my question was to my colleagues, isn't it time to consider going back to the old way of appropriating, where we appropriate it non-categorically, and we do it all at one time, and it sends a loud message of trust. It says, we recognize that you're public officials. We trust you to prioritize your appropriation and to spend it in a way that you spend more than what's appropriated. How they get the money, whether it's monthly or...
We got that already lined up.
that's something between the CFO,
We got that.
there's 2 CFOs, and the city treasurer.
We'll keep it the same.
Question. And so then they would be able to allocate their own raises within that budgeted amount.
Whatever one they want to do.
Yeah.
Just like they can today.
Yeah.
Right.
But it makes it easier because then they can look, oh, gee, we had a mild winter, whatever. And they don't have to come back and doesn't have this discussion. But I am troubled by my first question, which is whether or not these funds are going to be for things that are going to be consumed by June 30th.
Not gonna be consumed.
If it's for things beyond June 30th, then I have a problem with that, because that needs to be in next year's budget.
All right.
And I think that's in essence what you were saying, is that if it's for, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you're not, but to go along with what we're getting ready to do, to go back to non-categorical funding, why does this amount have to be encumbered by them submitting categories.
Because it's still
That's
in
the way it is
place.
currently.
Yeah, this is still in place.
That's why I say may as well approve it.
Yeah, it is currently, but we can change that.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just so that I understand your concern, but just so we're not painting too broad of a brush on this, the first item, it talks about this $221,520 for utility costs. It says for the remainder of the fiscal year. That's not going over into the next fiscal year. And so when we're talking about these may be expenditures for the next fiscal year, that's why I said that's an end of the year discussion, but there are explanations for how these are to be used, and I know I'm not in a position to conclude tonight that these are all for next fiscal year. And in regards to what the city manager said, that it was already budgeted, even within the budgets that the city manager deals with, she has to come to council to request that we transfer funds from one line item to another, because as it was budgeted, it would not be covered. And so it's not a practice uncommon. And so I would think that if that's the direction we're moving in, what we've just discussed, this really becomes a moot issue for tonight. And I say wait till year end, and then that's for the year end discussion on these items.
All right. Dr. Patton,
I'm
I'm going to try to reconcile
Okay.
the statement.
Okay, I was just going to comment on what Dr. Whitaker said. Eliminating category, all of that, the state still requires at the end of the year, school systems across the country, across the Commonwealth, have to, anything unspent by the June 30th must come back to the elected body of the county, the city, or whatever. So all of whatever is unspent will have to come back before you for consideration.
And it's unspent for items that are consumed in that fiscal year. It can't be for the next fiscal year.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to do is reconcile what you have said and what Bill has said. And maybe the reconciliation is that we don't take action on this tonight, but ask the city manager to ask the school superintendent, are these consumables by the end of the year? Are you really going to spend $261,000, I think you said, on utilities in the next 6 weeks?
Are you asking that it be coming back on the 22nd of May?
That's what I'm suggesting, because there's some questions here about.
Once again, I disagree with that, because, like I said, if it's on an issue of moving forward with trust, if this is what the school board, the CFO, they're sending to us, their chief financial officer is sending to us through the superintendent, then why is it that we're questioning that? And we already have a mechanism in place to address that, and that is at the end of the year. And so I don't understand why this is raising such a concern when, once again, it's a practice that we do as a city council with our own funds. Why shouldn't they be allowed to do the same thing?
I get it, but even you yourself said you couldn't say whether or not that.
Because it's not for me to say that. That's for us to deal with at a year-end period. What you're suggesting is moving more into micromanaging, which I'm not, because if this is what their financial officer is submitting through the superintendent, who are we to say that it's not legitimate?
Well,
Nate's got the floor.
I'm fine with bringing it up tonight and voting on it, because I'm against the transfer of money, because just reading the wording that he put in here, I like some of the examples how they did it. The $80,000 for painting Craddock Middle School, Victory Elementary, Parkview Elementary, Lakeview. Then it says beginning in June. Not saying when it's ending, because they're not going to get all them things painted between June 1 and June 30. So that's telling me it's going through the next
The
fiscal
state
year.
doesn't require that. The state doesn't require that.
So, to me, and just like, the replacement of the laptops, well, they're obviously can't order them and put them into use before school lets out in 4 weeks. So to me, that's obviously for something that's going to be used next fiscal year. So that's, just looking at all the items here, I don't see how majority of these can even be considered to be purchased and used before school lets out.
Yeah. Once again, aren't we therefore what Dr. Patton stated, that the Commonwealth deals with unspent at the end of the
That's
year?
law.
Right. What is unspent? See, that has been the question. What is unspent? Is unencumbered or encumbered? And so that's why I said that's a year-end discussion. See, because if they have encumbered it during the school year, then that becomes now an expense within that fiscal year. And that's where the debate has been over. What is defined as unspent? If we encumber it, if we encumber it during the fiscal year, or if it remains unencumbered. And I believe it has been the unencumbered funds that are returned. And so it's a year-end discussion, and the city attorney, that becomes, a definitional issue.
Thank you.
For the sake of clarity, your ordinance says all unspent appropriations under this ordinance or any ordinance appropriating funds for fiscal year 2019 public schools budgets shall lapse at the end of the fiscal year as provided under Section 22.100 of the Code of Virginia. Funds encumbered but unpaid by the end of the fiscal year will be deemed unspent appropriations that will require reappropriation by the City Council.
Right.
But they don't have to reappropriate.
So if
The encumbrance is for anything that's consumed in that budget year. You can't encumber funds to spend money on an electric bill for the next year.
But they can't just encumber it and not pay for it. That becomes.
Let's get a sense of where we are on 177. Okay. But Bill has suggested that we don't approve it, but we turn it back to him.
Require reappropriation.
I hear you're for approving it. I hear you're for not approving it. Can we get a feel for where we are, Elizabeth?
No, I won't vote for it as it is.
Okay.
I think that once we get through the discussion, if it's for this year or for next year, if it's for this year and they're using it in this year, but we really can't see how it is, but it's not up to us to make the decision, I don't see how we can, say move forward with it. But if it's for next year, then we can't, transfer those funds over. So I would say to deny the request and just have the funds. But are we getting an end of the year report? Is there something else forthcoming? And then if not, if it is, then why can't we just wait until that time to handle the transfers and adjustments and the end of the year stuff all at one time? Why is it all happening right now?
All right. It appears to me, and you can count just as well as I, that the consensus is not to approve this. Now, do we want to take the formal action, or do we want to ask the city manager to ask the school superintendent the very question that's come up? How they spent, are these really for expenditures that will occur and be consumed by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th?
And then come back.
And that way, we don't have a negative vote.
But, Mr. Mayor, once again, you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. The state law that the city attorney just read to us, and can you read it again? The unencumbered,
He's reading the ordinance.
the language that you were reading.
Funds encumbered but unpaid by the end of the fiscal year will be deemed unspent appropriations that require the City Council's approval to reappropriate.
So if it's encumbered but unspent,
Correct.
that will fall over into...
It's gotta come back.
Right. And what I'm saying is that by the action that we're taking, it's going to automatically fall into encumbered and unspent, because they will not be able to spend the money if we don't allocate it, which to me is disingenuous, because if we approve them for $52.4 million, and now we're using this as a mechanism for not approving, we have in essence cut their budget. And we've done it on a technicality. Yes, you have. Because the next argument will be, shall we return it back?
All right, hold on. I think the question before us is whether or not we're ready to vote on this. And if we vote on it tonight, it's going to be a negative vote if everybody holds their vote. Hear me out. Or do we carry it over to the next meeting with the direction to the city manager to determine whether or not these are truly funds that will be consumed and the supplies that they buy will be consumed by June 30th? My question is to council, and let's find out where we are.
I move to delay.
Delay?
Yes.
What is-
Delay.
Delay, Bill? Carry it over or vote tonight?
Well, I would say not delay, and I'll tell you why. We've been going through the same process all year.
Okay.
I made a suggestion that we're miles up from that now. And if we're talking about doing non-categorical funding on the new budget that's just a few months away, why do we want to say, okay, we're going to micromanage you even more closely than we did for the other months of the year?
So ready to vote?
You got a good point.
Okay. And you're ready to vote?
Yes.
You're ready to vote?
Well, it's not so much just ready to vote, but the standard that you're articulating, that you're saying that the city manager go back and find out if these will be encumbered and if these are for this fiscal year.
There's not a majority to support what I was saying.
But what I'm saying is that's changing the standard that the attorney articulated.
It didn't work.
What's that?
It didn't work.
What didn't work?
The votes are not there.
The vote's not there. We didn't agree
We're
with
going
it.
to vote on it tonight.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. But we do have a consensus that we're going to change the appropriation ordinance for the schools. So it looks like the old ordinance where we appropriated as a lump sum and at one time.
All right.
Okay. So
I'm a little confused. Are we removing 18-177 from the agenda?
it's on the agenda to be voted up or down.
Why can't we remove it from
That
the
was my
agenda?
question.
You want to delay it?
Has to be
Well,
voted.
the votes are not, the majority says you don't want it like it is until we check behind it. So we've had a consensus, so why go out there and vote it down? I mean, that's just rubbish.
Yeah, it is.
Well, because it's on the
It's on the
agenda.
agenda. But that goes back to what I'm saying. You've changed the rules in the middle of, because you created a new standard for approval. You're saying that you have to go back and see if these items are going to be actually consumed. That's
had a
where
question. I didn't-
but I'm just saying the question of consuming is not required by what the city attorney is not consuming, is whether it's encumbered and spent. It's not whether it's encumbered and consumed. And I'm saying you're changing the rules midstream.
Thank you.
Mayor, can the city attorney and the staff be excused to go to make that quick little change for the 7 o'clock meeting? They said yes.
What?
Mr. Moody just convinced me, and I don't think you convinced
You know what
yourself,
you're
but you
doing.
convinced me, that we ought to take this item, vote on it tonight, and amend it to not put it in any category.
And that way they
Absolutely.
can use it how they want.
Just
That's
do
what
it.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that's what
We're
we're
talking about changing the rules 2 months down the road.
Right. Just
And why not
take your money and do what you want.
tonight?
Are you saying to bring this back as a non-categorical
Yes.
request?
Yes.
But we
Yeah,
can't.
we can fix it right tonight.
We can do it
They're saying
tonight.
do it now. Don't have any limits on how they spend it.
how they want
Go it back. Give it
Unencumber
back.
it tonight.
You can't, but we would have to change the
Or make it
ordinance.
non-categorical.
wouldn't we fall into an issue since it was given to them categorically, since we're not going into that till fiscal year 19?
Okay, then we just
Problem
vote
is, we're
yes.
still under the old rules.
Just vote yes.
So,
Just approve it. That's, I don't know why we're going through all of this.
That's what you're really
Look at
saying.
mine.
You just approve, right, just go ahead on and approve it.
Yeah.
We do have a need for a closed
Yeah,
session.
just approve it.
Well, I've got
Tell Mr. Ashby to come back.
still the line, that's what I'm.
Mr. Ashby's coming back.
He needs to go do what
He needs to go do that, then he's the closed session item.
Okay.
Okay,
Bill's got another issue.
okay.
In this issue, I've been speaking on for a few months now, and that's for this council to, we're talking about the poverty initiative. We're addressing that with our city employees as much as we can, but we have a group of widows and widowers from the public safety, retired firefighters and police officers that are, in most cases, making below the poverty level. So I would like a consensus, and hopefully you can call for one, Mayor, that we task the manager with coming back with a plan to implement a $75 a month COLA for the widows and widowers, which is a small group, effective in December. So I'm asking for consensus to do that. I think it's the right thing to do for the right reason. And
Okay. Let's go around. Ray?
Can't separate them out.
How about if we do this? We usually, on something like this, ask the city manager to study it and bring it
Yes,
back.
let me come back on
Do
the
we do that?
22nd, because I've got some.
my consensus that I was going to ask for was a plan to implement it, or how she would implement it.
Okay. With that, you're asking
Come December.
for the city manager to study the feasibility and possibility and the cost? Is that it?
$75
To
Do it. I
come back with a plan to implement it come December.
I can't.
Show us what that would be.
You got your hand up?
Yes, I had, and I can share what information that we have. Right now, we have 147 spousal beneficiaries that are part of the fire and police retirement system, and 67 in the PRS as of January 2nd, 2018. And while we are not subject to Employment Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, we use the parameters of ERISA in the decision-making process. To that end, ERISA prohibits against any form of discrimination of singling one group out to do anything that is a part of a retirement system.
Well, that's
That's the law.
My question is, we do that all the time with public safety. We've given public safety, which are in a retirement plan. We do general wage employees. The two different groups. We do it all the time.
Since the city manager is articulating the law, can we hear from the city attorney on that issue at the next meeting in line with what Mr. Moody is requesting?
And we could do that on the 21st,
What you're essentially saying is, can you bring back,
this item.
can you study it and bring it back?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
raised a legal issue.
right,
But typically, when we ask her to study, it comes back as complete.
right, right.
Okay, do we have consensus that the city manager bring this back at the next meeting?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yes, 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 yes,
Yes.
yes. We got it. All right, are there any council, is Bill, do you have, are there any council liaison reports? I gave mine.
We need to-
I didn't report last time, but the media already reported it with the broadband. Portsmouth is leading the pack on that, and Dr. Patton and I were appointed as the liaisons for that commission. So we're moving forward. Mr. Jones was awesome. He was sat right beside me, so he helped guide me because I saw where other cities had given $100,000 toward their work, $100,000, and he had said that the work that Portsmouth had done was way exceeded what the other cities had already given. So Portsmouth is on the road to being a very smart city. Yes.
One editorial comment to my colleagues. I think the discussion tonight on the budget was really good.
Well, I just want to qualify that. It wasn't really good because we still aren't giving the teachers and employees raises. So I don't want to say it's really, really good. Yeah.
I have an update, Mayor, on an item I brought to y'all's attention yesterday because I said I would keep you posted on it. As it pertains to our pavilion canopy, we have had conference calls today with our promoter, which is Ken McDonald. We have had conference calls today with Span Systems. They will have to us between Thursday and Friday their proposal. Once we get the proposal, then we will know exactly what is expected to be done and the time frame that the work and the next steps for us. Secondly, the determination on the shows in the pavilion will be determined by the promoter, and right now he has only spoken of relocating 2 shows, but that will be on a continuous basis as we move forward in getting exactly where we are.
All right. Bill?
One other item, the bonuses. The city manager has certainly mentioned on numerous occasions that depending what the fiscal situation looks like come August, September, that our general wage employees would hopefully get a bonus. Our retirees would get a comparable bonus if available. So I just want everybody to keep that in their mind.
And that's in my budget message.
And it's in the
Budget message.
Yes. So
Did we ever get the corrected regional superintendent, assistant superintendent comparison chart?
No, we don't have that, but I can have that for the next meeting.
Okay, she said she'll have it by the end of the meeting.
Right. No, I said about the next meeting.
About the
I don't
next
have it
meeting.
because some didn't respond.
All right, we have a motion to go in closed session.
Move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A8 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel employed by the city regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision
correct.
of legal advice by such counsel specifically regarding the handling of tort claims against the city.
Is there a second?
Well, do they know what they're doing?
All right, any discussion on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucas
When you say
Burke?
that, you mean-
Mr. Mooney?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mayor Rowe?
Yes, we're in closed session.